Animals behave strangely during a solar eclipse. As the moon begins to obscure the sun, the crickets start to chirp. Flocks of birds fly hurriedly through the sky. Bees abandon their flowers and head straight back to their hive. In fact, this is where the phrase beeline comes from. All this begins before our eyes have even registered a change in the ambient light. Many wild animals are more sensitive to changes in brightness than we are, and they interpret the sudden darkening as an onset of evening. So the crickets start playing their evening song, and the bees and the birds fly home, ready to hunker down for the night. I suspect you'll be hearing lots about eclipses in the coming weeks as we approach April 8th and the total solar eclipse that will cross the U.S., passing just a short drive north and west of here. The last total eclipse to cross the U.S. was in 2017, and according to NASA, the next one won't come up until 2044. So you might want to consider driving an hour or two for this rare event. And if anybody has a lead on a good viewing spot, please let me know. During a total solar eclipse, if you can take your eyes away from the sky for a minute, and hopefully you're using proper eye protection, you can observe all kinds of strange phenomena. The temperature drops, the wind increases, colors appear different, our shadows get blurry in a strange way, strange lines move across the ground. They're called shadow bands, Google it. No wonder animals run for cover. They have no way to explain these strange experiences. They just know it's getting dark and fast. Our ancient ancestors were no better off. They hadn't calculated the intricate rotations of the earth, moon, and sun. Unlike NASA, they could not predict the exact path and duration of eclipses decades in advance. All they saw was the sun slowly setting, slowly turning black. That is why the Israelites, like many other ancient peoples, understood an eclipse to be a bad omen, a sign of God's anger or disapproval. Or maybe it was a sign of God's absence. The Bible describes times of great darkness and distress as hester panim, God hiding God's face. One such time appears in this week's Torah portion, which tells us the painful tale of the golden calf. The Israelites have witnessed the thunder and lightning of God's first revelation at Sinai and felt God eminently close to them. But then Moses ascended into the cloud at the top of the mountain, and nobody heard from him for 40 days. The Israelites started to worry that this whole journey had been some kind of elaborate trick. God had freed them and led them here only so that God and Moses could go off and have a laugh. Maybe Adonai was no better than the Egyptian gods who had failed to protect their people from the devastation of the plagues. Where once they had felt God near to them, now they felt abandoned. Where once they felt great light, now they saw only darkness. And in this darkness, they constructed the golden calf, an idol to soothe their anxious hearts. Is it effective? Not at all. But the acts of self-preservation we make in the darkness rarely are. There are times in our lives where the sun goes missing and the world feels dark. Personal or communal pain threatens to overwhelm us. Martin Buber calls this time an eclipse of the light of heaven, an eclipse of God. He captures the fear and loneliness we experience in those dark moments of our lives. We are like bees and birds scrambling for shelter when the darkness suddenly gathers. This metaphor of the eclipse of God is useful to help us understand better how to respond to the darkness in our lives. An eclipse, like the one that will cross Texas a month from now, occurs when the moon crosses between the sun and the earth. Suddenly we stand in awe and trepidation in the shadow of the moon as it obscures the daylight. So if the dark moments of our lives are like a solar eclipse, what lessons might that reveal to us about how to navigate those moments? First, we can remind ourselves that an eclipse is temporary. While all the phases of the eclipse in April will last about 3 hours, the period of total darkness, the totality, will last less than 5 minutes. There's a midrash about Adam on the first day of creation. As his first hours on earth went on, he noticed the ball of light in the sky sinking towards the earth and the sky getting darker. Having never experienced a sunset before, he cried out to God in terror, "Why are you mad at me? What have I done wrong?" He spent the whole night weeping and looking towards the spot where the sun had dipped below the horizon. It was only when he saw the sky brighten and felt the sun on the back of his neck that he understood the cycle of day and night. It's then that he says, "Such is the way of nature," and offered a sacrifice to God who had not abandoned him at all. Like Adam on the first day, our ancestors did not know when an eclipse would begin or how long it would last. But we have learned through observation that they are merely temporary. As the old Hebrew adage goes, "Gam ze ya'avor," this too shall pass. And so it is with the darkness in our lives. It may feel as though it will last forever, but eventually the moon will move and light will return. Like Adam, in our own moments of darkness, we might feel like God has abandoned us. Yet the Midrash reminds us that moments of darkness are a natural part of life. And this is the second lesson of an eclipse of God. The sun does not cease to shine in an eclipse. It's just obscured by something closer. In the same way, God does not go away during the dark moments of our lives. It is rather that there is some object, some person, some crisis that makes it hard for us to see the divine light. But the light is still there. In the last seconds before totality, one can see a phenomenon called Bailey's beads. As the edge of the moon moves in front of the last sliver of sun, we can discern the mountains and valleys on the edge of the moon. Sunlight peeks through these valleys, creating a string of beads around the edge of the moon, just like this. Again, please use eye protection. Normally, we cannot see the topographical features of the moon with our naked eye. But for this one shining moment, we can. And this is the darkness's third lesson. In the darkness, there is, if we can manage it, an opportunity to see more clearly than ever before. It is fleeting and easy to miss, but there is truth there, even in the darkness. So here we stand in the darkness of the eclipse. We know that it's temporary. We know that something is obscuring God's light. We know that there's truth here, but still we are scared because the darkness is troubling no matter how well you understand it. So what are we to do when we can no longer see God's light? This is the time when we must be God's light. Isaiah says that we are a light unto the nations, and on our best days we walk around feeling as if we reflect God's light into the world. But that's easy to do when the sun is shining. In the darkness of the eclipse of God, we learn that we do more than merely reflect divine light. We produce it. We are not mirrors, but lanterns, giving off our own light that illuminates the darkness. This is the test our ancestors failed at Sinai. Distressed at the eclipse of God, the Israelites tried to turn to a false idol to quell their fears, and God was furious. The Israelites were like that kid whose parents go out of town and he throws a party, and when they come home and find all the red Solo cups and stains on the carpet, he says, "You left. What was I to do?" And the parent replies, "I left you in charge." God left the Israelites in charge, and they threw quite a rager. And it is a warning to us to be vigilant in times of darkness, lest we forget that we can be the light. In a few weeks, we'll celebrate Purim and read the book of Esther, the only book in the Hebrew Bible which never mentions God by name. The rabbis suggest that Esther's name comes from Hester Panim, God hiding God's face. And hers is a story of great darkness. Haman plots the annihilation of the Jews. But Mordecai and Esther succeed where the Israelites at Sinai failed. They do not wallow in hopeless darkness. They do not say God has abandoned us. They act. They shine their light. And when the eclipse passes, their community has survived. There is no doubt in my mind that we are living through dark times. The horrifying events of October 7th, the agonizing war in Gaza, the terrifying rise in anti-Semitism. We have spent these months in the totality of an eclipse of God. And frankly, it has reminded me how little comfort Gam Ze Yavor provides. Sure, the eclipse will eventually pass, but it's dark now. It's cold now. The wolves are howling now. And I am an Israelite building a calf on the 39th day. I am Adam weeping through the first night. Between us and the divine radiance hangs a giant looming object moving slower than any moon. This object that blocks the sun is the unforgivable horror of that pogrom that Hamas executed on October 7th. This object is the murder and rape, the kidnapping and torture. How could one possibly see God's light in the shadow of such atrocities? And this object is made even more massive by the failures of the Israeli government, the failures that led to October 7th and the failures since. They block our view of the sun. And we must try to discern the truth, to map the mountains and valleys, the contours of those atrocities and those failures. This will be the work of the months and years to come. But in the meantime, we tremble in the shadow they cast. But what I know, all I know, is that we must be the light. We cannot succumb to darkness. We cannot turn to false idols that promise us security for the mere cost of our integrity. And we cannot look away, not from the plight of the 130 hostages who still remain in Gaza, and not from the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the human suffering and death on an unspeakable scale. We must find a way to shine a light towards that darkness too, lest we find ourselves engulfed in an endless cycle of death. The rabbis of the Talmud who saw eclipses as bad omens theorized about the moral failures that would lead to an eclipse of God. One answer is that an eclipse comes on account of two brothers whose blood was shed at the same time. There has been too much bloodshed. We have lost the ability to see ourselves as brothers. May the time not be distant when the eclipse is ended. May the time not be distant when the war will be over. May the time not be distant when the hostages are home to dine at their family's Shabbat table once again. May the time not be distant when the world community will awaken to our obligation to diminish the staggering human suffering in Gaza. And may the time not be distant where there is a true and lasting peace that ensures the dignity and security of two peoples in desperate need of a home. These are the things for which I pray, daily and with increasing fervor. And in the meantime, we must find ways to be the light. We are light when we meet hatred with love. We are light when we meet horror with hope. We are light when we meet pain with empathy. We are light when we meet indifference with attention. We are light when we meet fear with courage. May our light sustain us until the eclipse of God passes, until God's face is no longer hidden, until all are held and protected by an eternal light. Shabbat Shalom.
Face from me, I'm asking for your help. I call to you, please hear my prayers, oh God. If you would answer me as I have called to you, please heal me now. Don't hide your face from me. From me, I'm asking for your help. I call don't hide